Hey, good day, fellow deal makers. On today's call episode, we're going to have a conversation with a real estate investor who's going to give us some cold calling tips, right? So this guy's a pro at it, and he's going to give us some ways. If you're getting into real estate investing, or if you're a seasoned pro, you may want to listen up because this may transform your business and the way you do things. Brian, welcome to the show, man.
Josh, thanks for having me. Excited to be here and dive in on the cold calling topic. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. Now, before we dive fully into cold calling, you also have a podcast show. You're a real estate investor. Kind of give us an idea of who you are and some of the things you're focused on.
Yeah, I am a real estate investor. I specialize in creative financing. And for those who don't know what that is, it means you're basically buying on seller financing, lease purchase, seller financing, owner financing, subject to. That's what I specialize in. And I learned that from my coach and my mentor. Prior to that, I was in corporate America for 25 years. Josh, I worked for the same company for 17 years. I was an elevator salesman. So if anyone thinks that you need all this corporate experience to become an investor, you don't. Elevators and real estate are not related.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've been at it for a few years, and it's been really rewarding. It's been really great, and I love this niche of creative financing.
Super cool. And give a shout out to your show. Give us an idea of what your show is and where guys and gals and deal makers can find it.
Yeah, the show's everywhere. It's called A Better Way with Real Estate, and it's on Apple, it's on Spotify, it's everywhere. It's on my website as well, and we're running one episode a week on that show.
Super cool. All right. So this is a little deal unrelated,
Mhm.
but I got to ask this two questions about elevators because you're an expert. You've been in it for 17 years. You're an expert in elevators. First question, will softball pitch. What's your favorite elevator music?
Oh man. Wow, you threw me for a loop. That's a great question. I thought you were gonna make the ups and downs joke, which I get quite a
You
bit.
get often, right?
Oh my goodness, like every single time. I don't know if I have one picked out. Maybe circle back to me there. I
Yeah.
like definitely instrumentals. I don't like words. So it would have to be some type of instrumental for sure.
Yeah. So my favorite would be like a Sade, kind of like that.
I
I think
like
that's
that one.
right. You
I,
hear that on a lot of elevators, but I'm like, anytime it goes on, I'm like, yeah, that's my jam.
and I'm
Second,
impressed that you know that too, like the melody. That's really good.
thanks, man. I appreciate. I am cultured, right? And I have this button on my phone that tells me what song's playing.
Ah,
It's a cheat code for to try to look and sound smart. And I probably got it wrong, anyways. Second question is when you're on an elevator, there's this like code of you're supposed to stand in your little square. You're supposed to look down at your phone. No sounds are supposed to come out of your, like. So what's the proper elevator etiquette?
I really don't like that code. I mean, I think that also depends on where you are too in the country for some reason. Cause I did, when I was in the elevator business, I traveled a lot. I was traveling 100,000 miles a year. So I was in
Wow.
a lot of elevators in a lot of different markets. And, in the Midwest, people would say hello to you.
Hmm.
Maybe in the Northeast they wouldn't. Not to discriminate, but I think it really just depends on where you are. But I always would at least nod, talk to people, and say good morning or good afternoon. I mean, you got to have some type of greeting, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I like to mess with people on elevators because everybody is super anxious, right? Because they're like,
Mhm.
all right, socially, what am I supposed to do here? So
Yeah.
like I'll go, it'll be a 3-story building. I'll be like, hey, will you hit number 7 for me? And they're like looking and they're like, their brains are like fried. They're like, what do I do here? So that's if you ever see me in an elevator, I'm probably gonna love on you and mess with you.
There's a good chance that we have. I've been around quite a bit, so maybe we've already been in one together.
That's right. Awesome. We have an elevator here in our office, so next time you come to visit, we'll do an elevator ride together, and we'll record an episode in the elevator. Does that sound cool?
Wow. Wow. That'll be a first.
Sounds good. All right. So back to deals, Brian. How'd you get into real estate? So you pulled the plug on the corporate world. You jumped off the elevator, and you dove into real estate investing. How did that work?
There's the elevator joke. I liked it. Okay. Yeah, no, I did jump off. It took me a very long time to get here, right? And like we're going to be talking about today with cold calling, I was scared. And I was fearful for a long time, and I was comfortable in my current situation with my W-2 job. And it took me a long time to get over that fear. And that's okay. I started a lot later than I wanted to, but ultimately, once I got to the point where I was fed up and I had enough, I did a couple of key things that really helped me get from the W-2 world or wanting to do something and actually doing it. Is I got over the fear by hiring a coach, hiring a mentor.
Mhm.
We've discussed who that is. It's super important. I don't all of our lives, Josh, when we're growing up, we have coaches, we have mentors in all walks of life, school, sports coaches if we're playing sports. And all of a sudden we get out of school, we get into the corporate world, and we don't think that we need it anymore.
Right.
That's not true. And that's why I stayed in place for 25 years.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I got a coach that I was able to kind of crush that fear of like, what if I mess this up or what if I fail? I'll never not have a coach again.
I'll never not have a coach again. Yeah, because when you grow up, you're like, I'm an adult. I know it all, or I'll figure it out. And that's expensive. Figuring your shit out on your own is timely, expensive, and it's brutal because most of the time we can't figure it out on our own. Do you agree to that? Like, is
I
that
couldn't possibly agree more. And I thought I knew it all. I thought I could figure it out on my own. And I clearly couldn't. It took me 25 years.
you know, I think that is so awesome that you look back and you go, man, I tried to figure it out and I was kind of stuck, right? Like, and then I hired a coach. What was the precipice? What was the thing that turned in your brain that you go, I can't do this on my own. I need to invest in a coach.
That was really it. It was the investment. I had to start shifting the way that I thought about moving the needle in my life, you
Mhm.
know, and I was in reality, I was hiding behind. I think a lot of real estate investors do this. They hide behind education. You can listen to podcasts and read a bunch of books and get super comfortable and addicted to that.
Yeah.
So be careful because you do need to take action. And it was just the mindset shift, Josh, of okay, I need to invest in me first, not a deal, not a bunch of systems, not a bunch of, lead generation. I need to invest in Brian first. And once I came to terms with that and committed to it, things really started to change in my life.
That's super cool. Um, I've gone through the courses. The first or real estate course I ever went through was Carlton Sheets, buying house, no money down, creative financing. Uh, what was there was a specific term that he used back in the day. I forget. It was like buy houses, no money down. And I was like, this is a bunch of crap. And then I kind of stumbled upon an opportunity and I bought a house with no money down. I was like, oh my gosh, I made 14K on flipping a contract. And I was like, holy moly, this works. And it like kind of like baffled me. And I looked around, and I go, why is nobody else doing that? Right. And, but I was under the same thing. I didn't go to school for real estate. I was, working against guys and gals who were master's degree in real estate finance, and I didn't know what the hell that was. Couldn't spell it. Um, but invest in me first. I bought that course at a garage sale, to be honest. It cost me $5 probably, and it made me
Wow.
14K. Um, but invest in me first. I think that's so awesome in hiring a coach. What was the hesitancy of hiring a coach? So you got to a point you're like, I need help. Holy crap, this is expensive, right? Hiring a coach is not cheap. It shouldn't be cheap. It should be expensive. What was the
It,
hesitancy for you?
it is and it should be. I don't know if I fully agreed with it at the time. And
Mhm.
certainly my wife didn't. That was a roadblock, right?
Yeah,
And not to say anything negative about her because she fully supports me, but and I think a lot of folks in my situation project onto that situation. Well, no one's going to approve of this, right? No one's going to
right.
approve of this. And they don't need to, quite honestly. Only you do.
Nice.
So it was really getting over or just understanding that, hey, I'm not just giving somebody money. There's a return associated with this and a
Right.
big one. So you spent $5 and made 14,000 like that math works all day.
Yep. Yeah.
So that when I started to look at the return, like what am I going to get out of this, not just from a dollar standpoint, but also advancing me personally in my life growth, I've achieved more in the last few years than I did the previous 25.
Isn't that crazy? So I'm the hard-headed knucklehead guy who's like, oh, I'll figure it out on my own. Try to learn how to code, try to learn how to build websites, try to learn. I went bankrupt. I mean, I
Hmm.
absolutely worked myself from 4 in the morning till 12 o'clock at night with a new baby, trying to learn how to do stuff that I could easily outsourced, but I was holding on to what little money I had. I cashed out a pension to do it, and I lost it all. Now I go, who can I get to show me how to do this faster or do it for me, right? Like I
Yeah.
suck at that stuff. Get it out of my hands as fast as possible. You said you've
Do you think
experienced,
you needed, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just want
yeah.
to ask a follow-up question to you. Do you think you needed to go through that to be where you're
Oh,
at right now?
absolutely. This
Yeah.
knucklehead, absolutely. I had to I had to be at the end of my rope, crying, depressed, thinking about, ending it all multiple times before I finally found the value in investing in myself, right? Hire a coach, hire a mentor, work with advisors, bring on people and go, "Hey, I don't know what I'm doing." Humble enough, right? I'm the guy who had to lose it all to be humble enough to go, "I don't know." Right?
Yeah.
Um, and then
Love it.
to that's me. There's a lot of deal makers like me out there who just had to lose it all before they could build it all. And I've experienced faster growth in the last few years than the prior decades, right? So like I just thought I was smart enough, fast enough, strong enough. And this was a lie that I had growing up in my like training. Keep it in the family, do it yourself. Keep it in house. How did that work out, Josh? Not great. So, dude, I cannot agree with you more. Like you and I, we're brothers now, elevator brothers. We're hugging. Like I love you, and I love this message that you're sharing. It's so good. Invest in yourself. Invest in a coach. Open up your checkbook. Hire. If that's all you guys get, this deal maker thing is get a coach who's done it, who's doing it, and who's doing it, better than anybody else. Hire them. Find them. Go faster. Split the pie. Build better pies. Do it. You said there was another thing after the one thing is fear of hiring a coach and then fear of pulling the plug and going from W-2 to uh, full time. What did that
Yeah.
look like?
That was scary, man, because I had been with the same company, like I said, for 17 years. And it wasn't, I had good relationships with my bosses, so that was difficult. That was scary to tell them, and again, like we do when we're about to talk on the phone, we project onto things like we already determine the outcome before we actually go through it. And they could not have been more supportive of me, which was surprising. Like, hey, you're doing the right thing. We're so proud of you, and we'll support you, and we get it. I think the major roadblock behind that was again fear of not working, even though I have a coach and I have confidence in myself. This is a new venture, so if I fail, do I have to go back to the W-2 world? Am I going to run out of money? Am I going to look bad? My reputation.
Mm-hmm.
So fear of losing my reputation, fear of losing money, fear of losing my time. Like this is a waste of my time. I just had to get over that. And I had been working on mindset shifts for, the few years prior to that. So I was ready.
Yeah. The process of going from I'm leaving to real estate. Did you build yourself a runway? Did you have like, I already had a coach. I already had 10 deals in the pipeline. I already had money coming in. I had that safety net. Now I'm doing it. What did that look like?
Yeah. So it took from the time I started with creative financing investing, it took me about 9 months to leave my job. And a couple things happened. So yeah, I had a bit of a runway. So I had some income. I had proof of concept. Hey, this works. I can do this. And the second, I would probably say the most important thing that happened, and this is why having a coach is so important. And I never thought this before, because again, we're conditioned all the way
Mm-hmm.
through school to think this certain way, that we have to go to school, get a job, throw all this money in your 401k and retire maybe at 65.
Right.
My coach said to me, Brian, the job is the risk. You are
Whew.
expendable.
Yeah.
Some of the best advice I've ever received in my entire life. The job is the risk. And it was like, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. Like he's so right. Like they could, because I went through the '08 debacle where I went through 3 rounds of layoffs and I've survived. And it easily could have been me.
Yeah.
Easily could have been me. But that's when I said, okay, look, no one's going to fire me. I'm my own boss.
Yeah. Unless your wife fires you. Really, she's probably the boss around there.
She is, and she could.
Shout out to the wives out there. The wives of entrepreneurs. The wives and spouses, I should say, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I holy moly. And I'm nearsighted because I'm a dude. Uh, but like, shout out to all the spouses and partners of entrepreneurs. Man, it has got to be tough. Um, as you're building this, right? Like, how long ago was that you fully moved over?
So this was September of 2020, right smack
Wow,
in the middle
cool.
of COVID. Yeah,
Wow.
right. So
Yeah.
talk about nerve wracking,
Yeah.
and it worked out. I mean, it worked. So
Yeah.
I couldn't be happier.
Awesome, man. All right. So on a day-to-day basis, what does your day look like?
Sure, it looks a lot different than it did a few years ago, but I'm talking to sellers every single day like that. There's no way around it when you're a real estate investor. At least the way that I invest with buying on terms and creative financing, you got to talk to people. You got
Yeah.
to talk to people. You got to follow up. So I'm managing my team. I have a team of 4 people that work on the team, and we're out there trying to find deals, man, on a daily basis. So
Yeah.
it's a little bit more challenging here with what's been happening, but you just have to change your approach and stick at it, because these things change, right? Shifts,
Yeah.
markets are shifting constantly, and you just have to stick with it and be ready. Because what's happening right now, or what I'm seeing, is a lot of people are getting worn out. A lot of investors are giving up.
Yeah.
They think
That's
they
when you
can't do
keep going.
deals. So keep going, double
Yeah.
down. That was the other advice my coach gave me, double down. That's what he said when COVID was announced, March of 2020. He said, do not freeze, double down. And I made twice as many dials as I did the previous week.
Oh, dude. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to get into cold calling. We're almost there. Just a few more
Yeah.
questions. What's buying on terms?
Buying on terms is not buying conventionally.
Yeah.
Okay. So when we say we're buying on terms, we are going to a seller and we are going to use them as the bank, for lack of a better phrase. Like, they have a mortgage in place, or they own their house with no debt, free and clear, which is 1/3 of all houses in North America are owned with no debt.
Hmm.
So a seller has the ability to be the bank, just like Wells Fargo or Bank of America. You just have to make a deal with them. Or if
Hmm.
they have a mortgage, you can structure something on what's referred to as a lease purchase or a lease option, where you lock in an equity position that they have now for a time out in the future, maybe 4, 5, 10 years, whatever you can get. And then you're making their mortgage payments every month. They move on with their life. So those are like the two biggest scenarios when we're talking about terms.
Copy. All right. Ready? Cold
Ready.
calling. All right. So let's start with your first approach. Where are you finding uh, the information? How do you even before you even dial, what are you doing? Pre-dial.
Pre-dial. Okay. So where I get my leads from
Hmm.
is I'm talking to sellers who are actively trying to sell their house.
FISBOs for
And
sale by owners, stuff like that.
FISBOs, expired listings. Expired
Yep.
listings are big because that means they've been on the market for a while and
Totally.
weren't able to sell.
Yep.
For rent by owners,
Hmm. Yeah.
you can get a lot of you can, because for rent by owners could just simply be tired landlords. There could be tired landlords in there.
Yep.
So that's who I'm mainly going after. I don't want to say going after, so I'm calling are people actively trying to sell their house.
Right. All right. So it's a first sale by owner. They tried listing it with an agent. It's an expired listing, and they're sick of working with agents. And you call them. What's your strategy? What's your tactic? What intel are you doing prior? Are you doing analysis paralysis? Like, because you're training people now. You have a team of 4 who do this with you and for you. What's
Mhm.
it look like?
Sure. So the initial calls, just disclaimer, my VAs make those, but I used to make them all. Right.
Mhm.
And I can tell you the best way to make dials is to not analyze. Like, do not be up on Zillow
Yes.
looking at the properties.
Yeah.
And that's just going to number one, that's going to do a couple of things. It'll waste a bunch of time, and it's going to prevent you potentially from making the call,
Right.
because, oh, this seller's never going to agree to anything.
Yeah.
So
It's-
get rid of the distractions. I used to call right off a list, Josh, just a
yeah.
list of names, list of numbers, and I knew nothing about the house.
We feel as deal makers, and I used to have to make 100 calls a day, B2B sales, and man, it was brutal. And then I did door-to-door sales, brutal, right? Like, so like I would sit there and I would do all my analysis on my iPad, and then I would do all this work, and before I knew it, half the day was gone. I was like, well, I got to get lunch and come back, and then I'd made 3 calls. Then I got to a point where I'm like, I need to make 100 dials, 100 knocks, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Just freaking call, go, hey, I saw that you have your house for sale. Could we chat about it? Right. And then boom, we're in it. Right. All right. So ring, ring, ring. Hey, this is Brian or Brian's VA. Like, how does that go? What are some tips and tricks and things not to do on a cold call?
Yeah, man, this is so important. So again, you are first tip I would give the audience, okay, is that there's a reason that you are called the buyer and they are called the seller.
Mm-hmm.
You are buying their house. You are not selling them anything.
Yeah.
So do not feel like you have to tell them how great you are
Yeah.
and what you do and how you can solve their problem. First, you have to understand what their problem is if they have one, and then you can offer the solution.
Yeah.
So my tip to the audience is be curious.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And approach it this way because everyone's done this. Everyone's had this situation happen to them. What would you do if your neighbor put a for sale sign in the yard?
You're going to
What
call
would
them,
you do?
ask them the price. Why are you
You,
selling?
why are you selling? Where are
What's
you
going on?
going? What's going on? Yeah. Yeah. Same thing.
Right.
Treat the seller as your neighbor. So to get specific on the script, Josh, typically what we're doing is something that along the lines of what you just said. Hey, I'm Brian. I'm calling about your house at 123 Main Street. I'm just seeing if it's still available. Yes. Do you have a couple minutes to chat? I want to ask you a few questions to see if it's a good fit for us to buy. Yes, I do. Always respect their time, right? And then I go into some questions. I have a series of I call them money questions. Like, what are the 2 or 3 money questions that you can ask a seller that gets them to talk?
Yeah.
So get really good at it. So they can tell you about the house. And if you let them go and listen instead of telling, listen, don't ask, don't tell,
So
ask.
good.
They'll talk. And sometimes they'll tell you what their motivation is without you even asking.
Yeah. You want to hear another golden nugget? Like you're sharing some gold here, bro. I appreciate this. That was a southern thing. I appreciate, not hey, I appreciate you. So sometimes my southern gentleman comes out. This whole thing is the psychology of the call. It's you've got money in your hand essentially. I'm the buyer, right? The psychology is I'm not trying to sell them anything. Who doesn't want to talk to a potential buyer? If they're truly a true seller, they're going to take your call. And like if they start asking you, drilling you questions, then you could talk more. But man, the psychology of a buyer and the psychology of a seller. Hey, I got something you want. It's called money. Do you want to do a deal? Oh, this is so good, Brian. Thank you.
That's right.
So tip one: be curious. Treat your seller as a neighbor. Just what's going on? Why are you doing this? Where are you
Mhm.
moving? Right. Tip number two.
Tip number 2. So you have to find the seller's motivation. If you don't, you are wasting your time and you're wasting their time. You are
Yeah.
the seller that needs full has a house that's ready to go, fully fixed up. They're going to get full retail. The pre-qual letters are in buyer's hands. Like that's not my seller. I can't help them. I can't help them. And that's okay. And I tell them that. I'm looking for people who are not, in a distressed situation, not necessarily in dire straits, but they have some pain. They have a problem that I can solve that the conventional market can't solve. And I'm just listening for that. And I
Mm-hmm.
do that by asking questions in the right way and getting them to talk.
Yeah. What's a bad question to ask in terms of seller motivation, right? Like what's a wrong way to approach either the curiosity or the motivation? What do you see like people doing? You're like, ah, you just lost that deal before it even happened.
Yeah. So again, in terms, one of the questions that we ask is we start asking them some pretty personal questions
Yeah.
about their their home in terms of like, do you have debt on it? Like,
Yeah.
do you own it outright? Do you own it free and clear? You can't lead with that. I have a lot of newbies will lead with that because they're following a script.
A
You
checklist,
really,
right?
yeah, you have to avoid the checklist, but I can get that every time on any seller. It's just
Yeah.
when you ask it and how the conversation is going. I'm looking really to understand like, hey, your house came off the market. Like what happened? Why do you think it didn't sell? You would not believe how effective that question is.
Yeah.
Why do you think it didn't sell? people go, they'll tell, oh, then they'll give like 3 or 4 motivation points. Oh, my realtor, they
Mhm.
suck. Yeah, people were, people didn't like the kitchen, whatever. I mean, then you'll get them worked up.
Yeah.
Why do you
Yeah.
think it didn't sell? And it's their opinion, not Brian's opinion, not the realtor's opinion. It's their opinion.
I've seen a lot of, so I've hosted a bunch of real estate shows and such, and I've asked these kind of questions, and you're nailing it because I've seen kind of like an investor who comes in and their whole approach is to beat down the price, right? And they're going,
Mm.
"Oh man, that wall has a crack in it," or "That, oh man, that's terrible." And you're just pretty much insulting the person the whole time, and they know nobody
Yeah.
knows their house better than themselves, so they know that crack and they know all this stuff. And then they're like, "I could only give you this," and if they're desperate enough, they'll do it. But asking them like, "Hey, why do you think it didn't sell?" If they come out right off the bat, I think I was asking too much, or I got some deferred maintenance, or I've got to, like I'm just not good with people, right? Like
Hmm.
I have big dogs that it smells in my house, right? Like I love that. What's the weirdest answer you've ever received?
Oh, I've talked to thousands of sellers. It's hard to, that's like the elevator question, but the weirdest answer. I'm trying to think here. Ah, I've gotten so many. I mean, people will tell you like the craziest things about their house, but I did have a couple of hoarding situations. Like
Yep.
they'll tell you like, yeah, there's, you can't even walk through the house, right?
Yeah.
And then they'll go into that. But again, that's a problem you can solve, right?
Right. Hey, I'll take care of
Because
that
I
for you.
can, yeah, I like free and clear houses. And of course, you're not going to sell the house. And,
Right.
or people that have, there's been a lot of folks too, Josh, with COVID that just gave up. Like they stopped paying their mortgages, man,
Yeah.
which is upsetting, but it's just the way it is. But you hear all different kinds of crazy stories. And that's something that if you make enough dials, you'll pretty much hear everything.
Yeah. Holy moly, that is so good. Yeah, why do you think it didn't sell? What's when they come to, all right, Brian, you know, make me an offer, or it's 300 or something, and then like let's get to the brass tacks. How do you approach that subject?
I get that a lot. I get a lot of text back, make me an offer, or when you call them up, make me an offer. I'll just simply say, do you have a lot of people calling you up, just making you offers without seeing the house and talking to you? Because I would never do that. That's bad business.
Yes, we do get those calls coming in all the
Right.
time.
That separates me from all the people that are doing that. Not to say that, not to say anything negative about them, but that separates me
Yeah.
in terms of whenever I get a question thrown at me, my first reaction is ask them another question.
Ask another question. Man, this like judo right here. This is great.
Make me an offer, like, what's your price?
Yeah.
Like, well, I haven't seen the house yet. I don't know what the price is. If you ask questions the right way and frame the conversation the right way, I never make offers. The seller writes the deal for me.
Hmm. The seller, that's tip number 4. The seller writes the deal. I'm writing out these tips together with you. This is great, man. The seller writes the deal. Now, what does that look like? So we're chatting and finally they go, boom, and they're ready to write the deal, right? Maybe you've done the tour, so you like to go on site or send someone to do the site, and they're ready to write the deal.
Mhm.
How do you get them to do that?
Yeah, there's a couple of different ways I do it. So if I'm in person, we will have normally had some conversation around price, right?
Yeah.
And this is one of the reasons why I think Zillow is a bad idea to look at it when you're talking to a seller.
Yeah.
If a house is listed for 300,000, I know it is. I know what they want for it. What were you hoping to get for a purchase price? 280. If I never asked that question, I wouldn't have got the $20,000 discount.
Right.
I'd sell it for 280. Okay. Hypothetically, if I could pay that, what's the longest you'd be willing to go? I'm talking about like owner financing. Hypothetically, if I could get that for you, what's the longest amount of time you'd be willing to go?
Hmm.
Not I'll pay you 1,000 a month for 5 years. What's the longest you're willing to go? And it's me asking, and then they tell me, well, 10 years. Well, now I have a house at $280,000 that I can get financed from the seller for 10 years. I didn't make any offers. I just asked them.
That is so awesome.
Thank you.
And I'm
I
not
wrote a
just
book on this, by the way.
Oh, really? What's your book called?
I wrote an ebook. It's called How to Master the Phone in 90 Days. And I think we should just give it to all your listeners for free.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Uh, awesome. So what we'll do is, if you need to create a specific link or something, we'll
Mhm.
put that link. So if they want the free book on mastering the phone with
Mhm.
these kind of questions and this kind of training, we'll just put that link in the show notes. So you, if you're driving, drive safely. If you're jogging, jog safely. You can always go back to these show notes, click on the link, and they'll get you the free thing. Thanks, Brian, for
Totally.
putting that out.
Yeah, totally.
Um, so if I could get that for you, that price, 280. Okay, cool. Let's just hypothetically, if I could get that 280 for you, what's the longest you'd be willing to go for that? And they're like, because now their brain's going, oh, I don't know. Like I'm 60 years old. I could probably do another, having an income for the next 30 years might be good. How about 30 years? You'd love that. You right?
I'd say I wouldn't even need to go and see the house. I mean, I would. I said, okay, great. And again, you don't react. You just
Yeah.
take the information.
Yeah.
Like I don't say, oh, well, or if the seller said 2 years, which I would never take, I
Right.
would say, okay, 24 months. And then I'd say, well, what's the lowest monthly payment you would accept? What's the lowest monthly payment you would accept?
Because you're backing your way into the interest rate.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I would address the shorter term because I can't do all three. I can't max out the price and the monthly with the shortest term. I had a conversation with a seller this morning in Florida on a $2 million property. I did the same thing with him, and I got him from 24 months, and he's willing to do something that's 60 months
Yeah. Nice.
just
And
by
then
asking him.
so, all right. So, based on this, oh gosh, and I'm not gonna, I won't ask all the mechanics of the deal because I know
Mhm.
that you guys have a patent program and you're working on some cool things. But the mechanics of it is let's just say he says 5 years on a $2 million property. You get the pricing right. You guys repackage it and put to a rent to own situation,
Yep.
right? Is it baked in where you're depending on appreciation to occur, or does this program work in a flat market, or what happens if the market goes down?
Sure. Great. I mean, great question because we get this all the time because it's a fear for a lot of students and even sellers because he asked the same thing.
Yeah.
So time solves everything. And if
Yeah.
I'm paying a seller 10 grand a month,
Hmm.
that's not what this deal is. I'm just saying if I'm paying a seller 10 grand a month over 5 years, I mean, do the math.
Yeah. Oh,
Principal only, no interest. That's a big pay down. So you have 5 years. I mean, you could typically ride out a cycle in 5 years, maybe a smidge longer. We're not overpaying for the property. And then the loan's getting paid down. So you have outs if the buy-in doesn't work out. And he literally asked that same question, like, what are the outs?
yeah.
And I explain it to him. I say, but look, that has nothing to do with you. Like the contracts with I'm your buyer, not them.
Yep. Yeah. Super cool.
Yeah.
Um, so you have outs. What about the seller? Are there seller outs?
Yeah. The seller does have outs depending on what the deal structure is.
Yeah.
So on a lease option, the deed stays with the seller.
Yep.
So they would get the house back if I defaulted. They'd have to deal with the situation in said house, the buyer.
Hmm.
But normally, their loan's been paid down for a couple of years. They have some appreciation potentially. They don't want the
Hmm.
house back, but
Right.
they don't have to go through foreclosure. If an ownership transfer situation occurs on a subject to transaction or owner financing, then the seller would have to foreclose. If that's an issue, we can do something on contract for deed or a land contract where the deed just goes back to the seller in case
Yeah.
of default.
Yeah. Yeah. Super cool. Brian, as you've launched into real estate investing, you've built a team, right? Fairly quickly. At the time of this recording, less than 2 years. Um, what metrics do you measure if you're heading in the right direction, if you're being successful, or if you need to adjust?
Sure. Metric. And so glad you brought this up. If you don't know what your metrics are,
How do
I
you know
don't know
you're
why
winning?
you,
Right.
I don't know why you get up in the morning and get to the desk. So you got to measure what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
Because these business is predictable if you know your KPIs.
Yeah.
So we're measuring number of dials, how many people we speak to live,
Hmm.
what percentage of those live sellers that we convert to leads. Okay. And a lead is not someone who is, hey, yeah, sure, come on over. I'll sell you my house on owner financing. It's they're open to the idea.
Okay.
Okay. Then they go in a follow up. And then of those leads, how many appointments are we going on? How many offers are we making? And then obviously the conversion of the house under agreement. So that's what we're tracking. We're paying very, very close attention to that. We meet weekly with the team on those numbers.
What's a tool that you recommend using that helps the real estates who are high prospect hunters? What are a few tools that you use?
Sure. There's a couple of tools that I use to manage all of my contacts. I use a tool called Freedom Soft,
Okay.
which has been pretty great. I mean, you could call out of there, recorded calls as well. I mean, you got to be careful, watch the laws in your state,
Hmm.
but you can manage everything and workflows. So you can put them in different workflows where there's a lot of automation in there.
Yeah.
You can pull lists out of there. We don't really do that much, but it's a great system to manage everything and have a team in there all at the same time calling. The other tool I use is PropStream. I think
Hmm.
everyone's familiar with. And we pull lists, we run comps. It's a great tool, and I mean, for the money, it's completely worth it.
Yeah. What was the biggest mistake you've made? So you got into it, you had a coach, you have a system, you're making a ton of dials, hired some teammates, you're crushing it, wife's happy, you got a cool kid. What's the biggest mistake you made in this business?
The biggest mistake was, and wow, it's important to evaluate this too, was when I started having success, I started getting away from the stuff that made me successful and I
Yeah.
started piling on, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, well, I'll do a podcast. I'll launch a YouTube channel. Like I'll do some coaching. I started getting distracted.
Yeah.
And it's also the nature of the way that entrepreneurs work, I think. But
Yeah.
I got away from that, and you have to just check yourself. So I think it's good to have like a personal offsite every quarter or maybe every trimester, depending on what you're running on, and just evaluate what you're doing.
Totally. Such a great idea. So as an entrepreneur or, early, you're hustling, you're talking to everybody, door hanging, phone calls, sending out letters, you're doing all the work. Then you get in a few deals, you got the money in the bank, and then you stop doing all the things that got you successful.
Mm-hmm.
And then 6 months later, your pipeline's empty and you're like, oh crap, we got to turn this on again. So you turn it on, right?
All right.
How have you found to keep your foot on that gas pedal?
Yeah, it's really, again, I do the personal offsite, so I evaluate.
Hmm.
Um, it's really having the mindset of and knowing why you're doing this.
Hmm.
Look, there's never been a day where I've gone to this desk and said, "Oh, I can't wait to make a bunch of cold calls or call people."
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, there's some people that probably say that, but I'm not one of them. So I just always have to look back at why am I doing this? Like, what's my purpose? What's my vision? What's my vision for the business? And what's my
Hmm.
purpose? And I do this because, as I told you before, I was an elevator salesman. I was flying 100,000 miles a year. I was missing my kid grow up.
Totally. Ah,
This,
pain, right? You're like, I
right.
don't want to miss my kid growing up.
Yep. And that ate at me for a long time.
Yeah.
And now I'm home. I get to see him every day. I don't miss practices. I don't miss games. And I'm never going back to that life. So whenever I feel like I might be headed in that direction because maybe I'm not getting enough deals or talking to enough people, I just think about that. And it's like, all right, well, I'm going to go make phone calls,
Yeah. Gonna go knock doors. I'm gonna go
do
make
whatever
phone
it
calls.
takes.
Do
Yeah.
whatever it takes
Yeah.
because I'm not going back. I think when you asked me earlier, you said, Josh, do you think you had to hit rock bottom? Yeah, for me, yes. For others, I don't think so. Like wisdom is learning from other people, right? Like learn from me and these other guys and podcasts and all these authors and all these people that are going, "Hey, I've stumbled really hard. Learn from my pain," and that's such a great reason to keep going. Right? Is I want more time because that's all we. Everyone's investing all this stuff, and I want to be an investor and I want to be real estate and all the blah blah blah. Right? What do you really want? I want time and freedom. I want more time with my family doing what I want to do, and I want to
Mhm.
do what I want to do. Time and freedom, right? And yours is I want more time and freedom with my family. That's awesome. Um, have you ever lost sight of that in the process of building, right? In order to, I want to spend more time with my kid, so I'm going to not be with my kid working on this business full time. Have you had to find that balance?
What an awesome question. And yes, and I was made aware of that by my coach. Reason number 4025 to have a coach is they
Yep.
tell you this stuff because they've been through it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I had to, I was doing two jobs at once.
Yeah.
So I would make phone calls in airport lounges and hotel rooms and whenever I had time on the weekend. So yeah, I was away from them while I was trying to build this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's just, you have to make a sacrifice, right? You have to do what others are not willing to do.
Right. Yeah. How did you course correct? So the coach said, "Hey, red flag guy. Hey, if you go down this route, you're going to lose your family. You're going to burn yourself out. You're going to wind up in the hospital. You're going to." What was your red flag that you're like, "Whew, I got to pivot."
Are you talking about when I was in the job or after I was built the business?
Sure, you tell me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, either or. Right.
Yeah.
So, I had a kind of a personal rock bottom moment when I was working in the job, right?
Yeah.
Because I just wasn't living life the way that I envisioned or I wanted to,
Yeah.
right? I was angry, man. I had a lot of regret, a lot of resentment. I have a strained relationship with my father that started to carry over into
Yeah.
my son's life. And it was like, I got to do something different. I got to do something different. And it all started from what I talk about this in my book too, is it all starts from within. Like it took me so long to realize that until I start to change the inside, like nothing outside is gonna change. So I really worked hard on the inner world, and then things started to change on the outside. And I refused to believe that for decades.
Yeah.
Refused.
Bro, so thankful that you're sharing this with us. First of all, it's hard for guys to talk about feelings and emotions, and
I
right,
know.
like especially like when I was like, I was wrong, ego, right? So, but super cool that you're sharing this. Thank you so much. There's so many deal makers out there. I interviewed a guy who lost 50 million bucks, and he had to get back and he rebuilt it better. And it's so hard for us as deal makers to get help,
Yeah.
right? So, man, I love this. Hire a coach, invest in a coach because that's truly investing in you. As you're building this out, Brian, you said, keeping an idea of a focus, a mission, a purpose, right? So, one of yours is, from what I heard, time and freedom with family. What does the future look like? How do you know, you looking back, you and I hanging out 40 years from now, we're sipping on some Mai Tais or whatever we drink when we're 90 or however old.
Yeah.
How do we know we won?
Yeah, that's great. I'm sure there'll be an elevator involved in some there, Josh, if we're
Nice.
sipping Mai Tais. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's such a great question. How do we know that we won? And I think for me, it's less about what I have, like
Yeah.
material stuff, because I used to think. I mean, I have vision boards with jets and Lamborghinis on them and all that nonsense, right? Which
Yeah.
is great if that's what you want, but that isn't what fulfills you,
Yeah.
right? So for me, I'm close to I'm pushing 50 years old here, and I'm starting to get a taste of that time and freedom now, and I really just want more of it. I mean, I really truly want the freedom to be able to do the things I want with the people that I love the most, and really create those experiences that money cannot buy.
Mm, super cool. Now you have a podcast show.
Mhm.
Tell me the name of it one more time.
It's called A Better Way with Real Estate.
What's a question that you like to ask on the show with your guests? You've done, I think, 40 something episodes, or like I was trying to remember.
Yeah, it's about that. It's a
Yeah,
it's a newish show.
super awesome.
Um, yeah, thank you, and it's been a lot of fun doing it. I like to ask. I like to ask. Because I work with a lot of folks who were like me,
Yeah,
right? Were like me, the old Brian, right?
the old
10 to
Brian.
15 years ago, the younger version of Brian, and I think it's important for aspiring investors to hear those stories
Totally.
because you come to, oh, Brian's got it all figured out, or the guy who lost $50 million business. Like it's hard to visualize if those people ever had struggles.
Yeah.
So I like to
Yeah.
always hear what their story is, like So that's why I think it's important, especially for men, to be vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
And to share, because it's important for other men to hear it. Because as I started at the beginning of the show, I said, I refuse to believe that I needed any help,
Hmm.
which is nonsense. So I always want to get the message out like, hey, there's people out there listening that need to hear that you had challenges, that you didn't just wake up and roll out of the womb, this successful person.
I know people what it seems as though they have the Midas touch and anything they touch like turns to gold. And I know some of them and it's almost unbelievable, right? Like you're like, how when is this gonna run out? You know?
Yeah.
That's not me. I don't have the Midas touch. I have to learn of what to touch as I get older because not everything you touch turns to gold. And sometimes you touch stuff and it's poison ivy. So like
Yeah.
I'm learning the hard way. Couple questions that I have. Here's a if I picked up your phone and I looked through your most played YouTube video or song, what would pop? What would pop up?
I'm a big U2 fan. So, man, it would be either Where the Streets Have No Name or With
Ooh.
or Without You. I love that's like, if you
Oh.
ever saw the Seinfeld episode where they talk about, the guys in the car listening to Desperado and he just doesn't, he doesn't move and listens to the song. Like that's my Desperado. I just jam it up. No matter where I am, that song goes all the way up.
Yeah. With or without you, you too. I
Mhm.
I just
That's
got
my elevator song.
that's your elevator song.
Yeah.
With or
Instrumental version.
without
Yeah. Yeah.
you.
Exactly.
Yeah. Do you play instrument?
I don't.
Yeah,
No.
me either. One song you do not want to hear on an elevator is "Sugar We're Going Down" by Fall Out Boy. We're going downtown, and you're like, no, go up,
No.
right? Um, so one of the things I like to do, I have a deck of questions. Throw
Mm.
some randomness into our conversation. Sometimes super scary. Tell me when to stop. We're gonna have a fun time.
This is awesome. Stop.
Okay, here we go. Here's your question. There's two of them, so I get to pick which one. Uh, oh, just going with the first one. What do you think about intuition or following your gut? Do you think it's real or phony?
So I think it's real. Absolutely. 100%. You have to listen to yourself.
Give me an example of when you did not and it got you into trouble. Obviously, safe for work here, right?
Yeah, yeah, sure. Well, I'm trying to think of what's appropriate for the show. I didn't listen to myself for years. So let's give an example. I had an opportunity. I would say it was about 7 years ago
Hmm.
to get into real estate. Yeah, I think it was about 7 years ago. I had an
Yeah.
opportunity to enter into a deal and I was too scared. I didn't do it. I was like, I'm just going to stay with my job and
Hmm.
not do it. And I
Mm.
regret that. And, uh, you know, everything was telling me to go at it,
Yeah.
but I stayed right where I was because I felt safe and comfortable and frightened to death to do this real estate deal.
When's the last time you looked that up and then ran the calculations of what you would have cashed out with? Have you done that? I don't
Yeah.
suggest you do.
Yeah, I certainly have thought about. I've done that with a lot of stock deals too. That I
Yeah.
thought that I should have bought. Like
Yeah.
people told me to buy it, and I never did. It's like, oh man, I wouldn't even be talking to anybody right now. I'd be on that Mai Tai beach somewhere, right? So sure, I've done that, but we all do that, right?
Yeah, yeah. Mine was it was doing a deal. It was doing a deal with a friend I knew
Mhm.
forever. Man, my gut was just off on this. And I was like, ah, he wouldn't do that to me or whatever. And my wife even said no. My gut was saying no, but I went in. I was desperate and I wanted the home run. I wanted the grand slam.
Hmm.
And yeah, that cost me a lot of money and a lot of emotional relation capital with wifey and such like that. Now BKW, what's that stand for?
BKW. That's the initials of my family:
Super cool.
Brian, Katie, and my son. Yeah,
So you got a family-owned business.
I do. The kid gets it all.
If he behaves himself and he follows the rules of the trust,
He may not want it, but he gets it.
yeah, you whether you like it or not, kid. Um,
Yeah.
what what is one characteristic or piece of advice that you have for your future deal makers, your kid who's going to get this, maybe listen to this one day. He wipes off the MP3 or 8 track and he listens to this interview and he gets one piece of advice to the future self of your kid. What's that one thing?
Mm. I'm struggling between two because it's my kid, and I'm just going to say, it's an extension of what we talked about before with trusting your gut. It's like just believe in yourself,
Yeah.
right? Believe in yourself, listen to yourself. You know, you are when you decide, you are truly powerful.
Boom. That, and nobody could give you that, right? Like you talked about this might be it for our other show. I have an impact show for men,
Mhm.
but I just feel like I got to share it. Like if you had daddy issues like I did, right? Love my dad, but I had daddy issues, and my whole life I felt like I was chasing from my dad, from other men, from other people. I want to be validated. I want to be important. I want to be cool. I want to be Josh the success. Josh did this or whatever. And I chase until one day I think I had a coach. Here comes a coach who goes, Josh, do you realize that you're valuable and you don't need to, like, he called me out on my shit. Like, you don't need to try so hard. Like you're just loved. If God loves you and if you love yourself, what else do you need from anybody else? And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
shot through the heart, right? I was like,
Yeah.
uh, so that's what I hear in this for your son is one day just going, dude, you're valuable. You're important. You don't need anything else, man. You got this.
Totally.
That's
Totally.
good,
And I
man.
can completely relate to the dad thing too, man. Wow, it was almost like you were speaking directly to me.
Yeah. You know what's crazy though? All deal makers deal with this imposter syndrome. All deal makers deal with this. I'm just trying to fit in. I just want to feel important. I just want to feel loved, right? And yeah, there's going to be one guy out there with no Spock emotions, right? And he's going to go, I don't need that.
Yeah.
Okay, other than that person, we're all in this because we want time, freedom, love, acceptance. Tony Robbins nailed it with his 6 spokes of whatever. Um, Super cool, Brian. I really, really appreciate you opening the kimono and being vulnerable, man. During this interview, I probably didn't ask a question. So other than where can people connect with you? They're going to get a free book if they click on the linky do down below. So other than where can people connect you? Because that'll be the last thing we talk about. What's one question that I probably should ask you that I completely screwed up and forgot to ask you?
And I ask this question a lot on my show too.
Okay.
And I mean, you've covered a bunch. I think just going back um, to aspiring investors or maybe brand new investors, because
Yeah.
that's kind of where I am. And although I've mastered this skill of the phone, I'm still bad in other areas, right? Or improving in other areas as a business owner. I just think constantly working. So this isn't really a question. This is me giving advice. I think
Yeah.
constantly working on your personal game is the most important thing that you can do. Like have a routine, practice. And if you're going to pick anything out of the routine, like a lot of people say meditation, affirmations, all this stuff, I think the most important thing that you can do as a person is to have a daily practice of gratitude. Okay. Because if you cannot be happy for the things that you have in your life right now,
Totally.
you will never be happy ever. It doesn't, you're not going to, you're not going to, buy stuff and get money and then all of a sudden be happy. Like that's not going to solve your problem. It's like the divorced couple that gets a dog and they think it's going to fix their situation. Like you got to
Mm.
find a way to be happy now and work on that daily. First thing I wake up in the morning, 30 seconds of gratitude. Last thing before I go to bed at night, 30 to 60 seconds of gratitude. It's changed my life.
Super awesome, man. Super, super, super awesome. Yeah, I agree. Could I make a confession to you?
Yes.
I'm terrified of elevators, so I take steps to avoid it.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
wait, I'm taking steps to fix my. Oh, I messed up that joke. Oh, Josh,
You
darn
really
it.
did. I'm afraid of heights and I'm 6'7". So, and an elevator salesman. So I mean, that's even worse.
Sounds good. Um, Last question. Other than the linky do that they could find in here for their free book, what's a way for people to connect with you and do a deal?
Yeah, I'm all over social media. So if you go to my Instagram, that's where I mainly live. I shouldn't say all over social media. I'm getting kind of old for social media, but you can go to my Instagram page. It's the realbrianoneal.com. I can give you that for the show notes. Again,
Mhm.
bkwpropertysolutions.com is my business website. You can go there. And then when we give the link for the phone for the how to master the phone in 90 days, there'll be some attachments there and links to get in touch with me. And I'm
Super.
happy to talk to anybody.
Awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. What we'll do is we'll put all those links in the show notes. You
Mhm.
and I would just stay over after so we could get all that information.
Totally.
Ladies and gentlemen, fellow deal makers, as always, here's my request to you. Reach out to our guests and say thanks for being on the show. Find a way to do a deal with them. That's the purpose and mission of the show is to connect deals and deal makers together. That's my whole business model. That's everything I do is around connecting people and deals to deals. All right. So please help me with that. Connect with our guests and say thank you. If you're working on something and you want to talk about it here on a show, we like to share the story of deal makers, and then we find deals, and then we typically do deals together. So if you want to come on the show, talk about a deal, whether you're raising capital, buying stuff, investing in things, or trying to sell something, head on over to thedealscout.com, fill out a quick form, get you on the show. Till then, talk to you all on the next episode. See you guys.